If you came into this 49ers offseason thinking it was going to be just a few tweaks, nah, wipe that idea clean. One of the biggest pieces on the roster looks like it's headed out, and the exit could get messy. There's also a pass rush move sitting out there that might be value, or might be the kind of move you regret by October. They've met with a young prospect who's going to hit a nerve for anybody who still thinks about one of the wildest what-if turns in recent 49ers history. And hovering over everything, the Trent Williams situation feels like it's got an actual clock on it, and it can steer the whole 2026 plan in Santa Clara. We're in that part of the calendar where one choice doesn't stay isolated. It kicks off 2 more, then 3 more, and all of a sudden you're not just filling spots, you're picking what kind of team you're trying to be. Start with Brandon Aiyuk, because the way this is leaning right now, it feels like we're nearing the end of the story, and not the neat, everybody smiles on the way out version. The talk, pretty strongly, is that the most likely outcome isn't a trade. It's a release. Adam Schefter went on Barstool's Pardon My Take and laid out what he thinks the last move looks like. His view is that after the Niners had all those trade conversations with all those teams, the math has changed. The situation has changed. And the way Aiyuk handled himself this year, especially with the social media stuff, shifted the whole feel of it. Schefter said he'd expect Aiyuk to be released on the first day of the league year. That's not a stamp. It's not a guarantee. But when someone like that frames it that directly, you don't just shrug it off. You treat it like a real warning light on the dashboard. And the reason this hits so hard is simple. It's not just a receiver leaving. It's the possibility of losing a top-end talent and getting nothing back. That's where the faithful is going to split. You'll have one side saying, cut it clean, move on, enough already. And you'll have the other side saying, so we're really about to hand away a WR1 for free? The rough truth is, his value might be sitting at the floor right now. Look at how the timeline has played out. The Niners explored trading him before the 2024 season during the contract extension chaos, and it didn't actually move until the very last second when the new deal got done and that Steelers angle vanished. Then comes the serious ACL and MCL injury. Then the big unknown. What does he even look like physically when he's back? And then you add the disappearing act, something Kyle Shanahan described as basically unprecedented. If you're another GM, you're not just evaluating talent. You're pricing in risk, medical risk, locker room risk, chemistry risk. So sure, teams can still check in, because teams always check in. Schefter mentioned the Steelers, the Commanders, the Patriots, clubs the Niners had spoken to before. Washington has been floated as a remote possibility because of the college chemistry angle with Jaden Daniels. But even that is still sitting in the maybe bucket, not the this is happening bucket. It's more like calls get made, questions get asked, and then you find out who's actually willing to move forward. That's the tricky part. And that's where San Francisco gets stuck with the uncomfortable decision. If the best offer is tiny, something that feels like pennies, do you take it just to get something on the way out? Or do you hold your line, accept the release route, and make it clear in the locker room that this kind of situation ends one way? Because the next domino is obvious. If Aiyuk is gone, wide receiver becomes a top priority immediately. And once that happens, every dollar and every draft pick starts pulling toward that problem. Which ties straight into the other pressure point John Lynch basically put on the table at the Combine: the pass rush. Lynch made it clear, addressing the pass rush is a massive priority. When a GM says that out loud, it's usually because he already knows the room isn't good enough. And it's not just about landing one flashy edge either. Depth matters. Trent Williams is coming off a mid-season ACL tear. Bryce Huff's future feels uncertain. Yetur Gross-Matos is heading into free agency. So even if you land one answer, you still need bodies who can win when it's 3rd and long and everybody in the stadium knows the ball's going up. That's why this under-the-radar name is worth paying attention to: Kayvon Thibodeaux. According to ESPN's Dan Graziano, the Giants aren't likely to extend Thibodeaux ahead of his 5th-year option season, and the chatter at the Combine is that New York is going to try to find a trade partner instead. The reason is pretty straightforward. He's fallen behind other pass rushers in their building, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and the Giants might look at the market and decide they'd rather move him than pay him. Let me say this once. Thibodeaux isn't Nick Bosa. Nobody should sell it like he'd walk in and single-handedly fix the defense. But if you can bring in a B-level pass rusher with upside for something like a mid-round pick, and you're on the hook for about $14.75 million in 2026, that's not outrageous in today's NFL. Not for a team trying to keep its Super Bowl window from shrinking. Picture the shape of it. Bosa coming off one edge, Thibodeau off the other, and suddenly quarterbacks don't have time to wait on those deep developing chunk plays. You get more true third and long situations. You get more obvious passing downs. You get a defense that can actually finish games again instead of letting drives drag out. But it's not a free shot. If Thibodeau doesn't take that step, you've spent resources on a patch. And when you've already got needs at receiver and maybe left tackle, every move comes with an opportunity cost you can't ignore. So I'll put it on you. Would you rather take the aggressive swing on a player like that and live with the risk? Or would you rather stay patient and trust the draft and development to build the rush? And while the Niners are dealing with big, expensive decisions, they're also doing something that matters every single year. Hunting for cheap, hungry talent that can compete right now. One prospect they've met with at the Combine is a name that hit a nerve for a lot of longtime fans. Oregon linebacker Bryce Boettcher. Boettcher talked about meeting John Lynch, his dad being a huge Lynch fan, and he met with the Niners at both the Combine and the Senior Bowl. And this is where it gets a little different. He's a two-sport athlete who's also in the Houston Astros organization. So if an NFL team drafts him, the expectation is he'd step away from baseball and go all in on football. He's a walk-on story. 2 tackles in 2022. Then he kept climbing year by year, and in his final season he put up 136 tackles, plus a sack, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception. He won the Burlsworth Trophy, which goes to the best walk-on in college football. That profile, and the way people talk about him, naturally brings up a name every 49ers fan remembers: Chris Borland. Borland wasn't the exact same kind of prospect, but he had that same instincts over pure athleticism feel. The Niners drafted him in 2014 when Navarro Bowman was coming back from a brutal knee injury, and Borland immediately looked like one of the best linebackers in the league. 108 tackles and 2 picks in 14 games. Then he retired after 1 season because of head trauma concerns. Totally valid decision. Still, it left that massive "what could have been" hanging over the whole story. Boettcher isn't guaranteed to be anything close to that. There are real concerns about whether he has the speed to be an elite NFL linebacker. He's projected around the 5th round for a reason. But the bet is simple. Instincts can carry. Toughness can carry. And competition at linebacker might actually be necessary. Nick Martin didn't do enough to lock down the future starter label, so adding another young guy who can push for snaps isn't a bad idea. And then you zoom back out, because as interesting as those value swings are, none of them carry the same weight as Trent Williams. This one feels like it has a timer attached. Schefter's note is that Trent Williams is looking for a contract extension, and if a deal can't be reached, the Niners would let him go. At Indianapolis, Lynch said meetings with Williams' agent have been good, productive, and substantive. That's a positive sign. It's just not the end of the conversation, because if Trent Williams leaves, the replacement options get ugly in a hurry. Free agency? This is not a great year to be shopping for a starting left tackle. Rasheed Walker is young and solid in pass pro, but weaker as a run blocker. Jermaine Eluamunor is older. Braden Smith is solid, but you're not getting Trent Williams level impact. Braxton Jones might be the best both sides option, but he injured his knee in late October and has missed chunks of time in multiple seasons. And there aren't expected to be quality cap casualty tackles because teams know how rare competent starters are at that spot. The draft isn't clean either. The late first-round tackle range is full of guys who aren't ready for the Levi's Stadium spotlight on day 1. Monroe Freeling might be the top-rated tackle who could fall to pick 27, but he's young. He's only got 16 career starts, and you'd be throwing him into the fire. Caleb Lomu is an option, but the note here is the Niners didn't even send a scout to one of his biggest matchups, so it doesn't look like he's high on their board. Caden Proctor is a massive human, 6'7", 360, but Shanahan hasn't chased that body type, and Proctor also allowed a ton of pressures. Max Ihenacher is athletic but raw and needs development. Caleb Tiernan is a technician but still needs to add power. Blake Miller is more of a barrier than a bulldozer in the run game. So if you let Trent Williams go and draft his replacement, you're basically telling the league you're okay taking a step back right now and hoping it pays off later. And here's what makes it even tighter. If the Niners cut or trade Williams, the cap savings would only be about $4.7 million. That's not the kind of relief that makes a massive downgrade feel worth it at the most important spot on the line. Plus, he's due a $10 million roster bonus in March, and free agency begins on the 11th, so that turns into a real deadline to get an extension done. There's also organizational pressure sitting in the background. Neither Shanahan nor Lynch has been extended, so it's hard to picture them choosing a major downgrade at left tackle when the consequences could be immediate, like there goes the playoff run, immediate. But the fan frustration is real too. People don't love going back to the well for another extension this quickly, and the same debate is going to exist with Christian McCaffrey. That's the cost of trying to keep the core together instead of constantly refreshing it with young talent. Put all four stories side by side and the picture is pretty clear. Aiyuk potentially walking away in a way that brings no return. A pass rush move that could steady the defense or burn resources. A late-round linebacker swing that tugs at old memories and big what-if energy. And Trent Williams sitting at the center of the offense like one domino that can knock the whole plan sideways. Remember the question from the top, do you keep the core or do you hit reset? That answer is getting shaped right now behind closed doors, and it's going to define what the 49ers are in 2026. So I'll ask you straight, would you pay the price to keep fighting for the top, or would you take the pain now to build something that lasts? Drop your take in the comments, hit the like button, and make sure you're subscribed.